In 1798, Tadeusz Kosciuszko challenged Thomas Jefferson to put his money where his mouth was. That is, to put Kosciuszko's money where Jefferson's mouth was. Kosciuszko believed fully in the universal principles of liberty that were written about in the Declaration of Independence.
You know, the one that Thomas Jefferson authored and signed? The one that says, quote, "We hold these truths
to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Personhood, citizenship, all men are created equal and in God's, image.
And are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness at the very same time, slavery and the slaveocracy is advocated and is taking place.
On this edition of Self-Evident Shorts, we'll hear from racial justice practitioner Melinda Weeks Laidlow and Graham Russell Gow Hodges in interviews that we did for our film, The Purest Sons of Liberty, about the relationship between Tadeusz Kosciuszko and Agrippa Hull and the relationship between Kosciuszko and Jefferson, and how these all relate to the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Kosciuszko was a Polish national who became a Revolutionary War hero in the United States. For many years, Kosciuszko served with Agrippa Hull, a free black man who was born in Northampton, Massachusetts in 1759 and eventually joined the Patriot Army. Kosciuszko and Hull developed a deep bond. After the Revolutionary War, he returned to Poland to fight for Polish independence. At the turn of the 19th century, however, he found himself back in the United States, disappointed that slavery was still a major political force in the United States and that liberty had not extended to the enslaved people living in the United States. Kosciuszko wrote a will that would use all of the wealth that he was owed for fighting in the American Revolutionary War to free enslaved people and then educate them. He named Thomas Jefferson the executor of that will. In the end, Jefferson was unable to carry out the wishes of the will, and the money was never spent on its intended purpose of liberty and freedom. In our film, The Purest Sons of Liberty, we discuss these ideas and more. To see the whole film and the curriculum that accompanies it, please visit selfevidenteducation.com. What follows are clips of interviews that I conducted with Melinda Weeks Laidlow and Graham Russell Gow Hodges.
Thomas Jefferson, of course, is a very significant figure in our history. He's one for which there's a massive memorial in Washington, D.C. And to many historians, he's pretty much an unassailable figure. I don't share that. And Gary Nash and I set out to do this book because of the unfulfilled promise of the will that Kosciuszko made with Thomas Jefferson. That said, I agree that you look upon people as they were at the time, and Jefferson is again a very remarkable figure within our history. I should say, however, that Kosciuszko also has this place wherever there are Polish people in the United States, Milwaukee, New York City, Chicago. You're going to find a statue for Tadeusz Kosciuszko. You could say that he is the George Washington of Poland, or the George Washington is the Tadeusz Kosciuszko of America. They're on that level. He's someone who is regarded as, revered as a true founding father. So he's not an obscure figure. He's somebody who for much of the 19th century was heavily lauded. After the Polish migration of the late 19th century, late 20th century, his name sort of begins to find more currency among Poles. Interestingly enough, it also continues to find a lot of respect and representation among Black Americans. And this is something that I learned after writing the book by looking at newspapers. That frequently in the early part of the 20th century, there were mutual celebrations of Kosciuszko by African Americans and Poles. There would be parades, there would be speeches, political figures would show up in the 1910s and 1920s to honor Kosciuszko. And of course, this is a time when there was a stamp issued with his his likeness. So, I mean, this is a guy who throughout American history, maybe has certainly not played the same kind of role that Jefferson has. That would be disingenuous. But is someone we've, as a country, have always held in great respect and admiration.
So a couple of lessons came up for me, which is really the difference between having intentions to be about liberation work or equality work, equity work, and the inconvenience that you have to also be prepared to accept of actually living it out. And that's what came to mind with me in terms of Jefferson, and even though he had made this pledge to his friend, when it came to the point where it was uncomfortable, wasn't convenient, that he backed away from it. And it's not necessarily to say that that's, I've never been in that position, but right. But I think that's the difference. And I see that a lot in my work now, as about having the intention, saying that these are our values, our stated values. A lot of people are wanting to be on the right side of history, want to live out their values. Right. But inevitably there is difficulty with actually living it out anyway, because we've all been brought up in a culture that socializes us to actually reinforce inequity. So when we even have that intention to act in ways that are different to how we've been socialized, we should expect it to be hard.
I mean, Tadeusz Kosciuszko was anti-slavery before he came to America. He was taught in cadet school that slavery is wrong. He embraced the Enlightenment ideals of Paris before he arrives. Okay, so when he gets to America, he's already anti-slavery, and then the Revolution and his friendship with Hull cements those ideas for him. No, there were others. Certainly the Marquis de Lafayette, who was one of the most famous of European contributors to the Revolution, was very profoundly anti-slavery. He pushed Jefferson in Paris and hoped that Jefferson would go further in embracing anti-slavery ideas. It didn't succeed, but he thought that was something. Lafayette was famously for fraternizing with black soldiers. And when he returned on his triumphal tour in 1824, a couple of things happened. First of all, he was very shocked and dismayed that slavery was not only still a force in American politics, but in fact it expanded it. And that men like Thomas Jefferson had not relinquished their enslaved people. Okay? So he's disappointed. And he even said that had he known that would have been the result, that he might not have fought for the American Revolution.
Consider the potential systemic consequences of individual actions. The systemic standpoint, what would it have meant if this huge figure, this founding father of Jefferson, if he would have freed his slaves at the time, the consequential ripple effect of that, the influence of that action, right, could have changed the course of history. So all of those lessons, one person can change the world, perhaps. It makes me think differently, more and about the consequences of our individual actions, particularly, and this is maybe the third lesson, of people who have power and privilege and influence. It is the case that not all people have the same level of power and privilege and influence. And so for those of us who have certain privileges that we have, whether earned or unearned, there's an outsized responsibility to appreciate how consequential our actions can be.